Welcome to another episode of the Straight Up Chicago Investor Podcast. I'm Tom Shellcross. With me, as always, is Mark Ainley. Mark, we haven't talked about GC Realty in a while. How are things going over there?
Oh, there's a lot going on. We just did we follow the Traction model. Any small business owners there or medium-sized business owners, read the book Traction. It's a great management system, but it has us doing our quarterly meetings. And each quarter we have rocks, and the rocks are like the big goals that take the full quarter or whatever to help you keep your business moving. But a lot of our rocks this quarter were around hiring. So anyone out there, I'm going to put the word out here right now. We're looking to have to hire a COO, so kind of a second in command here, and we're looking to hire the number two in the finance department as well too. And then right now I am sitting in the maintenance dispatch department while we had somebody that I started training and they didn't work out, so we're looking for the 2.0 version of them. So anyone knows anybody in those three areas, or anyone in general that's looking to work in real estate and stay close to real estate through property management, I would love to talk to you. So please reach out.
All right. Way to steal our banter as a commercial. I like it.
Yeah. No, that was totally turned into commercial. But the add value there was Traction. Traction was one of those books for us as a small business that really helped change the trajectory of where we were going, at least trying to get things done as we grew. Life gets so complex the more people you add into the spectrum of communication and getting things done.
It's useful even like in the one-man shop, right? You're just an investor with a couple of units. I can't remember the guy's name. It's Gino something, but
Gino Wickman. Yeah, I talked to someone yesterday. And they're a one-man shop. I said, listen, you can read it, and you'll get a lot of good principles from it, just to run your one-man shop even from.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, cool. Well, what do we got for, let's jump into housing provider tip of the week here.
All right, housing provider tip of the week. We're going to keep it current with the topic we have today. But, someone called me the other day, and that's usually where I get these housing providers is I hear other people and I give them advice. I'm like, oh, that's probably a good one for everybody. But a couple of times in the last couple of weeks, someone called me thinking that they had a steal of a deal when the property tax were like $900 and they had a senior freeze on it. And I said, there's a more good chance that in a couple of years that's going to go away. And so just being the tip today is really making sure you're understanding, and maybe we'll be able to learn on today's episode exactly where to look that up, but make sure you're understanding what exemptions are on a particular property when you are getting property tax information.
Yeah, there's so many simple things too. Sometimes you'll see like on the MLS listing, it's like 2018 or whatever. Right, it's like 3 years old. It's got 3 exemptions on it. It's like, it's garbage.
Yeah. And I think tax is one of those things that if you're looking at a property that all the neighboring properties or anything in that town are 35 or 4,000 unit taxes, and all of a sudden you get one that's 1,000, that's a red flag. That's not a good deal most of the time. It's not. You got to explore that red flag first.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, today's guest, returning guest. So with us again, an attorney with KSN. For those of you who are regular listeners of the show, this is when you hear the appeal.tax, same company here. So when you hear those commercials, this is the voice behind it. This is our guy. He's 100% dedicated to tax assessment appeals. Since becoming a member of the Illinois Bar in 2015, his efforts have been to substantially lower his clients' property tax burdens. I've done several buildings with him, referred him out multiple times, been a lot of help with just helping me understand the process and also lowering my taxes. So without further ado, let's welcome Tim Jacobs to the show. Tim, how are we doing today?
Doing pretty good. Quick correction there. The member of the bar since 2005. So,
what did I say?
15. I'm like, man, yeah, that I started doing the math. I'm like, oh,
I'm bad at reading. Yeah. I wanted you to feel young again, my friend.
Yeah. My hairline was a lot lower in 2005. So
we were talking about what bloopers we could add to the show. So we're 1 for 1 already. All right. So Tim, let's start at square one. Mark kind of alluded to it in his tip there. If someone's just like, all right, I want to understand what are the property taxes? Have they gone up? Is there an exemption on them? Let's just start real basic here. Where can they go get that information? And can you just walk through like what they should be looking at to understand what the true cost of their taxes are?
Well, there's 2 good sources of information for that. One is the Cook County Assessor's website. Pretty easy to find, cookcountyassessor.com. If you've got your address or preferably your PIN number, you can search up the property's assessment history, current and prior, and see if there's any noticeable changes. You may not get what the numbers mean, but if you see an assessment in 2020 jump 20% or 30% in 2021, that's something you want to pay attention to, and may seek professional help if you see something, jump like that. Another website you want to look at as well is the Cook County Treasurer's website. It's intuitive, cookcountytreasurer.com. Just spell it out. The good thing about that website is it shows an exemption history, so you can look back 5 years. You can also grab a PDF of the most recently issued bill, so you can see the actual amount of the exemption. So if you run into a nightmare scenario like Mark talked about, where or an appealing scenario, I should say, where you see a $900 tax bill and you want to purchase that property, but you want to get a better idea what the taxes are really going to be once you acquire it, you can see the actual amount of the senior freeze. You want to grab the second installment tax bill. That is the one that indicates the actual amounts of any exemptions in the property. And there's an exemption section on the tax bill. You can see that. So you can see if there's a senior freeze on there for $10,000 because the person's been getting it since the 1980s. What your real tax liability is going to be.
Got it. So when we're comparing to previous years, like talk through what happened in 2020, right? Because they somewhat lowered assessed values across the board, or for a lot of properties. Did we actually see any sort of tax relief? Was it all kind of just shenanigans? And then when we're comparing it, like when 2021, we're seeing the bigger number. Should I be looking and comparing that to 20 or to 19? Because that was a little odd what they did there.
Right. So last year in 2020, the assessor's office, they shut down for a little while because of COVID, but they also decided after they reopened to do a kind of artificial revaluation of residential property. And by residential, I mean single family homes and small apartment buildings, 6 units or less. What they really did was give a blanket, on average, 10% reduction to every residential property in Cook County, whether you had a mansion in Glencoe or, a 2-flat in Jefferson Park. Didn't matter. You got on average about a 10% reduction in your assessment. But the part that made it somewhat fluff and not real, shenanigans to borrow your term, Tom, was that since 80% of the property owners in the county got this 10% reduction, the tax impact was pretty minuscule. I'll give you an example. My property got about a 10% reduction. I think my taxes went down about $15. So, when they give some widespread reduction to most property owners, the impact of those reductions are very minimal. So it didn't really help at all. And this year is a reassessment year for the city of Chicago. They reassess property every 3 years. The last time they really reassessed property, and that's, valuing it from the ground up, not just applying some token reduction, was back in 2018. So generally when you have a reassessment year, you do see the numbers jump. I think the contrast between 2020 and 2021 is a little more stark just because, last year were reduced for most property owners. But nevertheless, when you do look at these increases, a good rule of thumb, when you see a particular increase in assessed value, whether it's 20%, 30%, or God forbid more, is that's what you can expect in a tax increase. So if your tax bill was $5,000 on a $200,000 property in 2020, and that went up to $250,000, let's say this year in 2021, or a 25% increase, you can expect a 25% increase in tax. Or I can't do the math there. I deal with numbers all day, but 25% above $5,000 is what you're looking at.
Got it. And so we talked. I believe Chicago's divided into 8 or 9 different townships. You can correct me on that. Talk about it. Right now, we're recording this in mid-October. Which ones have been hit so far? Like, I know Jefferson. I know the ones up in Rogers Park. What can you talk through? Like, what has been hit and what have you seen in these different areas? Maybe like a 2 to 3 sentence rundown on every one that's come out so far.
Sure. So there's you're pretty close there. There's 8 townships in Chicago. There's 38 townships in Cook County, but 8 of them are in the city. The ones that have opened so far are Rogers Park, Jefferson, West Chicago Township, which is essentially the West Loop and the neighborhoods beyond it, the North Chicago Township, and South Chicago Township. And again, that's like North and South Loop, plus the periphery of neighborhoods, above and below that. The increases for residential property have been palatable, and it's been about 15 to 20% increase on average. But for the larger apartment buildings, and commercial property has been exponential. I've seen increases as high as 115%. I think that was the increase for commercial properties in West Chicago Township, and that includes apartment buildings of 7 units or more. Rogers or Jefferson, I think, was about an 80% increase for those types of properties. North and South Chicago were 60 and 80% as well. So those property owners are realizing significant assessment increases that, if they don't appeal that, are going to hit their bottom line come this time next year when the second installment tax bill comes out. There's a few townships that have yet to be open. Notably, Lakeview Township is the biggest one. That's Lincoln Park and Lakeview area, Wrigleyville. Lake Township, which is a big area, a big swath of the southwest side. It's basically like the Jefferson of the south side, and then Hyde Park. Those are coming out probably in the next 30 to 60 days. I think they want to get them all out by the end of the year. There's still opportunities to appeal. If you've got a property in the north or south Chicago townships, your deadlines to the assessor's office are still open. North closes this Tuesday. South closes November 1st. If you got a property in Rogers Park, Jefferson, or West Chicago Township, the assessor window is closed, but you still have an opportunity to appeal to what's called the Cook County Board of Review. You might have, but I wouldn't be too worried if you missed that window to the assessor's office. They're the office that creates the new assessment. They're pretty firm about their numbers. They don't like to correct themselves, so you don't get too many reductions at that office for many property owners. So if you miss that window, you could still go to the Board of Review. The Board of Review is essentially an oversight agency over the assessor's office. They review those assessments after the assessor certifies the township, which he hasn't done any of that yet, which I can get to in a minute. But so there's still opportunities to appeal no matter where you are in Chicago. It's just that certain property owners still have 2 bites at the apple and others have just 1.
With some of the initial ones that have been reassessed already this year, it seems like there's a lot of people with sticker shock. Like, what's like the politics behind it, or what's the numbers, or what's the rumors behind like kind of these sharp increases people are feeling?
Well, there's a newer Cook County assessor in place. He was elected in 2019. These type of shockwaves, Mark, reverberated in northwest suburbs at that time. And that was his first time at reassessing property. And a lot of my clients in Evanston and Barrington and those types of areas were basically making the same complaints that Chicago property owners are now. They have a different view of assessment processes. They essentially that assessor came in the office on the campaign promise that commercial property, which does include your large apartment buildings, were undervalued by prior administrations. So they're here to quote unquote correct that undervaluation. So they've been instituting a new model that in terms of its effects has greatly increased the valuation of commercial properties. On residential property, it's been somewhat about the same, although there are some nightmare scenarios. I can give you an example of a home in Jefferson Park that last year was assessed at about $185,000. Might have been a little low, probably should have been more about $2.25. They got their assessment notice and they got revalued at $349 million. So here's hoping they have their homeowner exemptions. Essentially there's a new sheriff in town, to put it bluntly, and they are operating differently than prior assessors.
That all makes sense. So Tim, so let's say I see my assessed value go up dramatically, but let's say that's common for the block I'm on. I'm on a block of 3 units in Portage Park, and we all went up to the same amount. So now my assessed value is still in line. My new assessed value is still in line with the neighborhood. Do I have a chance to appeal here, even though my value has gone up? Like, how do you fight that?
There's a couple ways to fight it. One common method is you do look at your neighbors. Is there some type of lack of uniformity in assessment? Is there similar properties that are for whatever reason being assessed lower? Usually you can find some, even if it seems, on a quick scan of things, that everything seems to be assessed fairly evenly. Another way you can look at it, especially for your 6 let and unders, did you recently purchase this property? If you bought it in the last couple of years, you might be able to use your purchase price to your advantage, especially if that purchase price is exceeded by the assessor's valuation. And I see that many times. If you refinance recently, one of the questions I ask my clients is, did you refinance in the last, 12 to 18 months? The reason why I ask that is that many lenders, although not so much lately, would require an appraisal being done. So if you had an appraisal on the property that you already paid for, and that appraisal shows that the assessor's valuation is excessive, that's something you can use as well in your appeals.
Is there I know Cook County is different every time, but is there a window of time when it opens, the reassessment opens and closes? Is there supposed to be like a rule of thumb?
Yeah, there's two windows, Mark. There's the assessor window, which is essentially 30 days. They'll mail a notice of reassessment to every property owner in a particular township. So everyone in Jefferson Township had the same window. Everyone in Rogers Park had the same window. It's been tightened a bit though, because in the past, Mark, they used to give you 30 days to file an appeal, and then you might get an extra 5 to 10 days to submit evidence. So you really had like a 40-day window. But that's been completely eliminated, which is very unfortunate because sometimes these cases take more than 30 days to put together. So you have one window there. You do get a second window at the Board of Review, which I mentioned. That's that second agency that hears tax appeals. Their window is a little more forgiving. It's a 30-day window to actually submit an appeal, which can be done online, and you don't need much to do that. You literally just put your PIN number in there and say you object to this, and then you get an additional 2 weeks or 15 days to submit evidence. The assessor windows are more widely known because everyone gets an assessment notice in the mail. So that notice will indicate your window. It's also indicated on the Cook County Assessor's website. The Board of Review windows are a little more difficult to find. The board doesn't send notices out to property taxpayers. They'll publish something in newspapers, and you might hear about it in the news. But that's something where that's where your tax counsel comes in, because we're the ones monitoring that. So it gets a little risky if you miss that assessor window. You can certainly try to file on your own at the assessor and board, but if you miss that assessor's office, it's risky to go to the board because you might not know when that window's opening because it's not as widely published.
So you have the three areas Cook County's broken down to, and it's triennial. Chicago's every 3 years, or the Northwest suburbs every 3 years, South suburbs are every 3 years. Am I understanding that correct? That's
correct. Yeah, you get the city, north and south, and the dividing line for the suburb mark is North Avenue.
We're filling out, that's good to know, dividing line, North Avenue. I like that. So we're filling out paperwork on an annual basis for different tax contesting. What are we filling out in the off years? What type of tax contestant are we trying to get in those off years?
Well, you can still appeal every year, even though you didn't get, a new assessment. So, if you, God forbid your value drops or you have excessive vacancies in some of your buildings, you can appeal to get your assessment down based on its lack of occupancy. Or, if you purchased a property in an off year, like I said before, or, if for whatever reason, maybe a lot of your neighbors in the reassessment year successfully filed, but, in Tom's example, you said, I think this looks pretty good, so I'm going to leave it alone. They all appealed in the prior year, got reductions. Now you're out of line. So you can certainly file any year. The only difference is that the amount of savings doesn't last as long. If you file successfully now in the city, you get 3 years. If you're in the south suburbs and filed this year, you're only going to get 2 years worth of savings because it gets reassessed in a couple of years. If you're in northern suburbs, you're down to your last year because they're going to revalue that next year.
Gotcha. You brought up vacancy. I know we talked about this on the last show, but I do want to bring it up again. Is you have the ability based on your occupancy rate to get a tax relief. Can you kind of give us, and I think that changed recently too, or there's some rules around it that changed, if I'm from America, but can you kind of give a rundown of who qualifies and what it takes to qualify for a vacancy relief?
Sure. I mean, any property owner can qualify if you lease your property. I mean, you can even ask for vacancy relief on a single family home. But some of the things you need to show is efforts to lease the property. If you are trying to lease it, you've engaged a broker, you're listing it. If it's being renovated, you can get vacancy as well, but you got to establish the renovation. Give the assessor's office a permit. Show pictures that if you can date them, that's even better. Show them, certain maybe contractor statements as well. So, some of the things that have changed over previous years is they're making you prove it up a lot more. In the past, when I first started in 2005, you could turn in an affidavit and that was it. Now they want to see an affidavit. They want to see pictures. The assessor's office actually requires utility statements now to show ostensibly a drop in electricity and gas usage based on no one living there or less people living there, so to speak. So it's a little more of an uphill climb to prove it up. But any type of leased property, you can get this type of relief. And if you don't get it at the assessor's office or you miss your window to the assessor, you can go to the board of review. They're still pretty strict as well. They don't require utility statements, but they want pictures. They want dated pictures. They want efforts to lease, or, if you're working on the property, evidence that you're renovating it.
Got it. So quick comment there. So Tim, we're doing this on one of my properties. We filed for vacancy. We've done a rehab since March. And what happens then? Like, do they just give a relief, but the assessed value doesn't go down? Like, you don't get like a reduction in the assessed value and get to ride with that for X amount of years, right?
Well, yeah, I should mention that vacancy relief, when applied, secured is temporary. It's only for 1 year. So if you've got a building in Chicago and you successfully prove up vacancy and it's good faith effort to lease it or renovate it and it's still unoccupied, you will get a temporary break in your assessed value, which will show up on your taxes next year. But when the 2022 assessments pop open again, that assessment should pop right back up, and it usually does.
Does it go even higher? Because now they got the permit, and now they got, you're doing work to the thing. Like, do you almost screw yourself in the long term? Well,
not really. I mean, it's. I always tell, if you've got to get the break, even if it's for 1 year, and the theory behind popping the assessment back up is not necessarily a bad one. They just don't want to assume that you're going to be perpetually vacant. So if you're vacant again the following year, you can go ahead and apply for it again with the same type of evidence. And assuming, you're working on the property, and even if you've had some delays, that's okay. I mean, they'll still give it to you, or they should still give it to you. It's just they don't want to assume you're vacant for 3 years. They want you to keep proving it up and establishing it so that they feel good that they're getting, the theory behind vacancy relief is to give you to, return some of the money back to you to put back in the property. And so you'll get it back up to snuff. You'll get it back up to a more valuable state that they can reassess in the future. It's not meant to just give you a tax break. It's meant to encourage leasing, if that sounds counterintuitive.
Gotcha. I'm not sure if you said this, but time frame, like how long does it have to be vacant? So if it has to be vacant for more than a quarter of the year, like to really qualify?
Well, I would look more at level of vacancy than timing. I mean, timing does matter, Mark. But, if your property is only 10% vacant for the year, depending on, some units were vacant for part of the year, then they were occupied and they were vacant. If you've got more than 10% vacancy for the year, however it's distributed, that's when you can seek vacancy relief. The reason why I say 10% is that the assessor's office, and I don't know to the extent this is accurate or not, but they do tell us this, they bake 10% vacancy into their assessments. So they assume you're going to have some level of vacancy throughout the year. So you really need to exceed 10%. And usually I say at least 20, otherwise it's not really worth asking for. So you want to have at least about 20% level of vacancy throughout the year.
Gotcha. I have one more question along the same line. If I buy a property today, middle of October, and I'm buying it from somebody that had it vacant the entire 2021, can I file for the vacancy factor based on time I didn't own it for the taxes? I'm going to be at closing. I'm going to get credited prorated taxes that I'll have to pay actually next year. Can I go in and contest taxes based on vacancy prior ownership had that leads into my vacancy that I'm going to have now that I'm going to spend the next 6 months? You
can try, Mark, but the county has kind of a counter to that. And it's if you buy a property that's vacant, then you assumed it was vacant. Vacancy is kind of an equitable remedy. I mean, you got to go in there with clean hands. You had a building, you didn't know what was going to happen. Also, these tenants leave you. If you go into it knowing that half the building's unoccupied and pay $200,000 and you're assessed at $200,000, and you ask them to knock it down to $100,000 because it's half occupied, generally the response you're going to get from the county, and this is both the assessor and board, is you knew what you're getting into. You just bought it half vacant, so don't come to us and ask for a break. Now, the alternative is really if it was occupied and then all suddenly all these tenants left on you, that's a different story. But I don't think you can, ask for vacancy that the prior owner incurred, just from a, you run into some counterpunches from the county that are tough to get around.
What about everything we've gone through for the last 18 months? As far as, is there any sort of relief or, similar to the vacancy of like non-paying tenants? Like if a tenant, I feel the same pain with a tenant that's not paying than I do a vacancy. Is there anything around that's came out that we should be aware of?
Well, yeah, that used to be a non-paying tenant was not a basis to get vacancy relief because there was two things you had to establish. First, there was the place was unoccupied and you weren't getting rent. When in the past, if you just had a non-paying tenant, they would tell you, well, you got to evict that person. That's not our problem.
Yeah.
Last year, the Board of Review did accept economic vacancy arguments, which are you got a tenant there, so it's not really vacant, but they're not paying. And you'd prove it up by looking at your 2019, profit and loss, and then compare it to your 2020. So they did accept it last year. I believe they'll probably accept it to a certain extent this year because we've got this, we've had an eviction moratorium. So tenants have got a stronger hand than they ever had in Chicago, which is, pretty impressive. So I believe they will entertain those arguments. I'm not so much sure about the assessor's office, but I believe the board will, but that remains to be seen. They haven't opened yet. So it's not certain if they will, but given the environment, I'd be willing to make those arguments on my client's behalf. I feel pretty good about them.
Got it. So Tim, it's an odd time to be analyzing, like, let's move to commercial buildings real quick. It's an odd time to be analyzing them, especially if you're in Lakeview and you don't know what these taxes are going to do. Is there a general rule of thumb? I've heard guys say like, well, your taxes are probably going to be 15% or 18% of the gross rent. Like, are there any of those rule of thumbs that we should be looking at when analyzing? Because right now that's just a black box and it's besides your debt service, probably one of your biggest expenses.
Yeah, in prior life, it was always 105%, 110%, or 115% tax proration, right? I would say go at the highest end you possibly can, especially for those towns that have not been reassessed, like Lakeview. I expect Lakeview to get hit pretty hard. Lakeview has always been treated similarly to West Chicago Township, at least in terms of increases, even though they're different areas. If West is going up a lot, Lakeview's going up. And it's not necessarily a rule of thumb that should happen, but generally when the property values in West are doing pretty good, that usually means the property values in Lakeview are doing pretty good. So, in keeping in mind that the last time the assessor truly valued Lakeview Township, just to pick on that one in particular, was back in 2018. So the market is considerably better now. So, if you're buying property, it's a pain in the butt, but consider reproration agreements. When I was a closing attorney, I used to hate those things because once you did a closing, you want to be done with it, seller, buyer, everybody, but you don't know what's going to happen. And if you're going to close in the next 30 to 60 days, that assessment's probably coming out. So you'll have a better idea during the executory period of that contract to figure out the taxes. But, I would say if it's not out yet and you got to sign that dotted line, strongly consider a reproration agreement or, ask for 30-40% increase if they won't go along with that. Because that's the only way to really make you whole both sides. They're not going to give you too much. They're not going to give you a windfall from the seller side, and from the buyer side, you're going to get an accurate accounting of the taxes when it comes due.
Yep. We're in that situation right now on one deal, and on another deal, it's actually in Portage. So it's Jefferson Township. We just saw double. Originally in the contract, we had 2020 taxes, which had to be our 2019, which we had to update to show, hold on, no, we got to go off of this because otherwise you've owned the building for almost all of 2020. We're going to be paying this larger amount. Like right. Your proration is going to be extremely short. Mm-hmm. So we've seen it on both ends here.
Yeah, I would, hold back money and do reproration, unless, if you know what the new assessment is, you could probably figure it out, with the aid of your transactional attorney, who's probably going to call me or someone in my field, as they usually do. But, I think those kind of went the way of the dodo for a while, but I think they're going to be coming back because it's the only fair way to do it now. I don't know how else you could do it.
Yeah, it's so ambiguous, right? You can be off by like tens of thousands.
Right.
All right. So Tim, let's talk about like if someone's looking at their statement now and saying, you know what, I want to appeal, and they're thinking, well, I can just go online. I can put the pin in. What does someone like you provide? Like talk through that, because I don't think everyone understands everything that goes into winning this argument. Like what are you putting together and preparing and putting in front of the board to say, hey, this shouldn't be assessed at 500. It should be at X.
Sure. The nice thing about these appeals for homeowners is that they do make it easy to appeal. Everything's online now. You can sit at home on a Saturday night, find what you think are good comparables, submit them, and hope for the best. But I've been doing this for 15 years, and not only do I, look for comps, but I also look at the decisions I get back. And especially with the case of the board review, I could see the board's analyst notes, and those notes tell me a lot. They tell me what the county likes to see in their comps. What you might think is a good comp is not necessarily what the county might think is a good comp. So after having to do this for 15 years and, thousands of homeowner appeals, I have a pretty good feel for what the county's looking for when I submit this. So with that in mind, I know what to look for ahead of time, when I'm preparing the appeal. Whereas a homeowner who does this once a year, once every 3 years, they're not going to know. They might find a few houses on their block that are somewhat similar, that are assessed lower, that should indicate a lower assessment. But there's finer details that the county's looking for in these comps that only someone who's done this as long as I have, or is through thousands of appeals that I've done, would know. And I'll give you a good example. Years ago, my firm represented this homeowner in I think it was Glencoe, and him and his wife were engineers. And they filed their own appeal to the assessor's office, and they got denied, and they just couldn't believe it. They did all this work. They had no idea why this case was denied. And they came to our office and dropped off boxes and boxes, like bank boxes, of documents they submitted to the county in this appeal. And they asked me to look at it and say, what's missing in there? And I told them, I'm not looking at that. And they were very frustrated. I said, why are you looking at it? I'm not looking at it because the county didn't look at this. They don't have time to look at that stuff. You get a few minutes to make your case. So, you've got to make sure you're making your case very succinctly in a matter of, a page or two in most cases. Otherwise, you're going to lose. So, it's that type of experience that lends itself to more successful appeals. Doesn't mean a homeowner can't do what I do. They can. But, more often than not, they're going to miss stuff, and they're going to give too much or too little, where having practiced for these places for, 15 years, I know just the right amount of information to give the county to get the results my clients are entitled to.
That's an awesome story. I love it. It's so true. Doing too much when you don't have to sometimes doesn't even make sense, especially in the city. So awesome. As far as commercial real estate goes, and when I say commercial real estate, maybe talking about retail or industrial, is there any big that's always feels like every that's always got big jumps, or we always get a large intake of people wanting to sell their building whenever those letters come out on the true retail or commercial or industrial side. Anything new on that front that we can you can share with us?
Just that they're the ones bearing the brunt of the new assessor's policy on revaluing those types of properties to get them back up to what their office thinks is a true market value. When you hear the nightmare stories about 80% increases, 100% increases, it's usually they're if you had a Venn diagram, they're getting most of those types of increases. And I don't know the reason for that, because when I get these cases from clients, they are, I wouldn't say easy to prove up, but pretty simple. These, especially the income cases, it's a lot like when you're underwriting property to buy. You look at the NOI, you get your rate of return you're looking for, and you capitalize it. There's what the property's worth. When I do that and compare it to the assessor's numbers, they're so far out of whack, it doesn't make any sense. So in terms of those types of properties, those are the ones I would encourage most to appeal. Some homeowners, like I mentioned, aren't getting treated too bad. They're getting, 15, 20% increases, which in a reassessment year really isn't that crazy. That makes sense. If you assume residential property increases at, what's the rule of thumb, 7% a year, it's been 3 years, 20% is okay. But, when you've had an 80 to 115% increase for some of these commercial properties, especially given the year we've had, or year and a half, I should say, that makes no sense. So anybody, if you're a tenant and you're in a triple net lease, you want to pay attention, because your lease payments are going to go up. And by the way, those people can file their own appeals. Tenants liable for taxes can file an appeal on a commercial property they don't own. Just a little food for thought. But those are the clients those are the property owners that should be most aggressive about appealing, because some of the numbers, that's the numbers that are so out of whack. And, the way the board of review looks at these, they're more, the board looks at it more how investors look at it. And I think the board's probably going to give a lot of corrections to these assessor increases. So, those people should really be paying attention right now.
We were we're taking over a 90,000 square foot retail in South Suburbs. And my first question with the guy is like, why would you buy this? So the taxes always scare me so much when it comes to that. But his answer was, hey, as long as I can get, as a buyer in Cook County commercial, you have to just get it at a low enough price point that you can absorb $15 a square foot taxes, worst case scenario. So he bought this building, I think, for like $22 a square foot, and his taxes are $10 a square foot. Like, it's something crazy.
That's eating up a lot. It's eating up a lot of square footage there, Mark. One of the odd impacts, I should say, of the new assessors' policies on commercial properties. I used to never have sales cases for commercial properties. And the sales cases where you've got a purchase price that helps you. And these are happening every day now. Where like, I don't need your income. I got your purchase price. That's all. That can prove up the case right here. I had cases come in from the northern suburbs. The property is assessed. It was assessed in 2019, so it was assessed by a new assessor. I think it was at $800,000 as an industrial property. Client bought for $500,000, and it was a legit price, fair market value. There wasn't a steal, and so these types of cases these types of arguments are surfacing now based on the new assessors' policies with respect to commercial and industrial.
Tim, you mentioned buying at a steal. One question is, let's say you buy something off market, right? We're not on the MLS, but you got a HUD statement saying, hey, I got this at this price. Can you still use that to help your case? Or do they want to see like, no, we want to see that this went to market and that, X amount of people got to see it and so forth?
When I get those that weren't, at least listed at the time on the MLS, I'd like to find canceled listings, is what I usually take in those cases. Is like, if I don't see if there's no MLS that was current, I like to utilize canceled listings just to show that there was if the price dropped flat, at least you can show like this is a market value transaction. Yeah, it sold for a lot less than it was previously listed at because it couldn't fetch that price. So that's market value. Those are a challenge, though. Those are a challenge. The county does look skeptically on that. One thing you do want to see, though, is that the seller gets some equity out of this. If they made some money on it, it's a little easier to sell. If they end up bringing money to closing, then that's a tough sell because that seems it was distressed and they just had to get rid of this thing. But if you don't have an MLS, try looking for canceled listings, or a statement from the broker saying, yeah, this is the best they can do here.
Got it. Cool. So everyone's freaking out about this now. Where do you see long term, right? Like, are we just every 3 years in the counties you're at, are you going to see these giant increases? Like, you got to feel a lot of job security right now, I guess.
Yeah, I do. I don't mind talking people off ledges, but these are too many people. I'm talking off ledges. I've done that my whole career, but the volume is a bit much now. We shall see. Next year is 2022. That will be the northern suburbs get reassessed. It'll be the assessor's second crack at that. So, I think if you see these types of increases again, it's going to be very problematic. It is an elected office, though, so people can vote. If they don't like these policies, the Cook County assessor is an elected official. You can vote him out. I think he's up for election next year, I want to say. And so that's one solution. Or, you can just deal with it and be ready to appeal your assessment if it's too high. One thing I want to tell your listeners is that these assessment increases are happening now. Obviously outside of encouraging them to appeal it, which they should, when this shows up in their tax bill is going to be a bit delayed. They're going to get their first installment next February, March. No problem. That's always 55% of last year's bill. They can calculate that now and the county will get those out. The second installment tax bill, which will reflect any changes in the assessment, might not be coming out until October next year. And the reason being is that the assessment process is so far behind. The appeals are so far behind that the county may not wrap them up until, late next summer, which, they can't calculate tax bills until all these appeals are done. 3 years ago, the border review was already done with maybe half the county. they haven't even opened any of these townships yet, not through their own fault, but because the assessor hasn't closed any of these things, hasn't issued decisions on any properties yet, which is pretty alarming because we're already in October, and they usually issue decisions by late spring for some townships. So this isn't a problem to deal with. You have to deal with it now, but this isn't a problem that's going to hit their pocketbooks until probably this time next year.
Got it. That all makes sense. Good stuff there. Mark, anything else?
No, that's it's a lot. So there's a lot of great information here today for people looking to buy or looking. Yeah, that's awesome.
Let's do it. Let's wrap this up then.
All right. So as we'll just say KSN in general, like as far as the tax appeal division, like how have you guys been competitive? What's been your advantage over your competition?
Well, we're primarily an association law firm. We represented community associations for 35 years. We've always done tax appeals, but I came on board at that firm in 2014. So we started doing these, more frequently and exclusively on our clients' behalf. We've expanded recently. We've merged with another firm, my former firm. Law Office of B.R.H. Smith. He's merged firms with us, so we've expanded the type of properties we handle. Gary's office, primarily handled single family homes and commercial and apartment buildings. So we broadened the types of properties we did. I mean, we did those appeals anyway, but we do them with a lot more frequency. So we're really growing, and we can handle a greater volume than we ever had before, as well as diversity.
Tim, what's one piece of advice you would tell someone looking to buy their first property here in Chicago in this environment?
Definitely it's not intuitive, but look at the old tax bill. It's so readily available now that it wasn't when I was buying property, 10, 12 years ago. You can find tax bills online. You can find assessed values online. You don't want to hit that pitfall of that person who bought a property with really low taxes and they thought they're getting a steal, but it turns out there's a senior freeze on there. So, mortgage rates are still low. It's a great time to buy. Prices are a little elevated. It's going to be coming down a little bit, but you don't want to get stuck with a ticking time bomb on taxes. You don't want to buy a money pit. And you guys deal with money pits more in terms of structure, but it could also be a money pit when it comes to taxes. So, you definitely want to pay attention to these things now, especially if you're going to become a homeowner. You're going to know them soon enough, so you might as well know them ahead of time.
Nice. Love it. We'll have to put those links in the show notes. All right. We asked you this question during COVID when you're on last time. So now that we're kind of post-COVID, what do you do for fun?
What do I do for fun? You put me on the spot here, guys. I have very good neighbors, Tom excluded, that I like to get together with. From time to time, we have a lot of families in our neighborhood who like to get together for, Friday night cocktail hours, happy hours, so to speak. That's something common. Getting together with college buddies, once or twice a year that live out of town is also a good time. I went to Marquette University in Milwaukee, and once a year I get together with some friends who went there, and also went to Madison for the Madison Marquette basketball game. So that's always a good time. And we didn't do it last year, obviously, but we look forward to doing it this year.
Good stuff. All right, Tim, what's a good book, podcast, or self-development activity that you would recommend to our listeners?
I would say I'll give you self-development. One thing I always try to do
Can't say happy hour again, though.
Yeah, outside of drinking, which is essential, is exercise. I love to run 4 or 5 days a week around my neighborhood and local forest preserve. I think, exercise definitely helps with physical health, but it also helps with mental health. And these are stressful times, and I find that my weeks and days go a lot easier when I stay committed to exercising 30 or 40 minutes, 3 or 4 times a week than when I don't. And I try to fit that in a work day, just like shower and brush my teeth. So.
True that. All right. Besides yourself, name one person in your local network you'd highly recommend to other investors as a quality resource here in Chicago.
I'm going to name someone I named last time, but somehow the name didn't come through. It's my friend Ted Coleman. He's a real estate agent with Compass. Me and him worked on a lot of deals back in the day when I would do a lot of transactional work. He's a prominent and growing real estate agent in the city of Chicago. He's got quite a portfolio, but he's still, operates like your neighborhood agent who, answer calls, answer emails, and treats you like a family member. So,
Tim, thanks so much. You provide a ton of value to our listeners. How can they learn more about you? Is there any way they can provide value to you?
Sure. You can look me up at ksnlaw.com. That's my firm's website. We also operate a site for tax appeals called appeal.tax. We make it quite easy to sign up for an appeal and get your questions answered. You just put in your PIN number and some contact information, and we usually get back to you within 24 to 48 hours.
Nice.
All right. Chicago facts. So, Tim, I know you grew up in Ravenswood, so I had to find something with a Ravenswood tie, and this is a stretch of a tie, but it's there. All right. There'll be multiple choice for you, Mark. So this item, which is probably nostalgic to, I'd say, the early 70s, also has some Ravenwood ties to it. It was invented in the UK, but it was presented at a trade show where it caught the eye of a Chicago entrepreneur who purchased the rights to it. And then before long, it was exclusively manufactured at 1650 West Irving Park. So here's your multiple choice on what was this item. Was it A, lava lamp, B, waterbed, C, the 8-track cassette player, or D, Pop Rocks candy?
Go with D, Pop Rocks candy.
Tim, what you want to shot at this as well?
Sure. I'll go waterbed.
Guys, it was the lava lamp.
Damn,
Kirby International was exclusive manufacturer of the lava lamp.
We still have in our leases that you're not allowed to have a waterbed, which is kind of funny because I don't know the last time I've seen that. Like it's just kind of kept me making the cuts on our new versions of leases. All right, that's awesome. So much stuff was made here, and I actually learned something every time you get one of those.
It's all on the internet, so it's definitely true.
Yep, definitely. So, all right, everyone, thank you. Tim, there's an awesome show. If you head over to straightupchicagoinvestor.com, download our Chicago residential zoning cheat sheet. Awesome information on there. Good to kind of keep on your desktop to reference if you're out looking at properties or you're looking to add value to properties. So check out our Tuesday tip and visit our Facebook page where if you're looking for resources or properties, there's about 700 other people on there that might be able to help you. So thank you guys, and we will talk to you soon.
Very good. Thank you, guys.